And it's Dara, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And the surname's like a space station, if you want to say that. So some people get... So NASA's the easiest. It's the easiest way of...
NASA.
Yeah, it's the easiest way of...
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm Simon Blake, and this is Just About Coping, Series 2. Before we start, if you haven't heard the trailer for this series, please do give it a listen. It's a nice introduction to our My Whole Self campaign, which is the key focus for this second series. Our first guest is Dara Nasr, and Dara is the Managing Director of Twitter UK, where he's been since 2012. We chatted about Dara's career to date, the importance of authenticity in leadership, what makes a great team, and navigating difficult times at work. It was also great to hear his thoughts on our relationship with social media, and of course, a bit on self-care and a bit on dogs. Social media was a theme that ran throughout our first series, so talking to Dara seemed like a great place to start this second one. I hope you enjoy it. Dara, thank you very much for inviting us to come and talk to you here at Twitter UK HQ today and to talk to us a bit about the My Whole Self campaign. Just to start us off, if you could think about 5 words, 5 phrases, thereabouts, to describe yourself, what would they be?
I suppose along the lines of family, dog owner, mischievous, distracting. It depends how many words dog owner is.
Take it as one with a hyphen.
Right. Numerate, based on the amount of words chat we just did. Yeah.
That's a bit more about mischievous.
Yeah. I suppose it started at school. I think I get it from my dad. I've got quite a sense of fun. I'm an only child, so I think I went to school to socialise as much as to learn. So I just had a lot of fun. So it'd often be, the report, the age-old, he's got so much more potential, just likes mucking around. I was never a bad kid, but more a kind of slightly mischievous. And I think that's followed me in adult life. I take a lot of joy at having fun, whether it's at work, at home, but, whether it's pranking my children. This is coming across well, isn't it? Or like just at work, just having fun. So it's that kind of thing. I take a great sense of it. I think there's an element of British societies that's a bit like that. If you look at the comedy shows that celebrate those kind of things, which I kind of grew up with. But yeah, I think as well, if I look at all the companies I've worked at, however hard times have been, and inevitably there are good times and bad times wherever you are, it's often been a sense of camaraderie and fun that's got everyone through stuff.
And distracting. Interesting
yes,
word. It
kind of links. Yeah. I'm actually, if I had more words, I would say I'm very distracting and also easily distracted.
You've got as many words as you want. Come on, tell us about both of those things.
So I say this to people, my colleagues, and is that, if we're in an open office, so if we're sat there and a conversation starts, I'll often join it. And also, if I think of something I want to talk to people about it. So it's that kind of stuff. So yeah, distracting and easily distracted.
And just for the record, there are lots of people who like dogs on this podcast. Yeah. What sort of dog?
He is officially a cockapoo, although I'd say he's 99.8% cocker. And he's called Dave.
So we talked a bit there about mischievous at school, bring some of that into work, helps get you through hard times. And the whole question, I think, which we're exploring with this campaign is how do you take the best of yourself into it, all of you, and ensure that enables you to be well, perform well, have fun in the workplace. So can you just, would we see a different Dara at home and at work, or shades of the same?
Yeah, shades of the same, I'd say. In today's society, we're very lucky, often what kids can come into work and stuff. And when they see me at work, they don't not recognise me, which I suppose is right, I think, in the concept of bringing your whole self. I think that talking about that mischievous side that you want to talk about, I think if I go back to, I suppose, my parents, it's quite interesting. They were very yin and yang in times. My mum is the key breadwinner in our house, very successful, very driven, serious. So my dad was very laid back, and I think I'm very lucky because I think I've got 50%, the best 50% of each. Well, I hope I have. The alternative would have been a disaster. But I think that kind of followed me into work. When I finished my degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up falling into kind of the media world, as most people do. And it's based on a couple of my school friends recommending, that you would love it. So when I started my first job at a TV company, I walked in and it was an era where everyone wore suit and tie. Or men did, of course, and women were very smartly dressed. So I thought, wow, okay, this is the day that I have to grow up. It's serious. And anyway, so I met my boss, who was this really serious chap. I thought, oh, wow, he's senior, isn't he? I sat down. Then, first time I'd had a corporate email address, I suppose, first real time. And then, my boss then sent an email that appeared to be odd later on, but didn't think much of it. Then it transpired someone had got onto his desktop and sent this email, and everyone was laughing about it. And I thought, oh, it's not all that serious then. And I thought that, and it obviously took a while to realise, but actually what was really championed at that company and other companies I worked at is you worked incredibly hard, but you worked as part of a team and with each other.
Yeah.
And that company was a fantastic company, because when I decided to go into the media world, I really wanted to go into TV, and I was approached by, a few different companies, and this company was easily the smallest. And my mum, who was worried about would I have zero ambition or drive, said, well, why are you choosing this company? And I said, and genuinely two things. One thing I said is I'm guaranteed to get my own email address, which shows my rank idiocy. But secondly, I said, everyone just seemed so happy when I was being interviewed.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think she just thought, okay. But looking back, it was true because that company was tiny.
Yeah.
If you look at, the TV advertising revenue, they contributed to, they got about 2%,
right,
whereas ITV, say, got 50%. Okay. So we were tiny.
Yeah.
But they were so loved because they're focused on customer service, and failure was often celebrated. And what I mean by celebrated was you weren't ever knocked down. You go and you try and you fail, you learn and you progress.
The point about failure is an interesting one, isn't it? That when it comes to our whole self, we often worry that we'll be exposed. Imposter syndrome will be caught out. And is that sense of learning from failure something you've carried through your career and trying to instill in the culture at Twitter here?
Yes and no. The one thing is when you're living it, when you're a 23, 24-year-old, you don't know that's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's the only experience you have. And that wasn't specifically what, the seniority. I don't think they were going around going, right, we have to celebrate failure. It was just what ended up being muscle memory in order to get better. I suppose the big transition then was to Google. Google's almost a fish that's bigger than the pond. Yeah. And it was superb. But I think because it is and was such a wonderfully successful company, you forgot what failure was.
Okay.
And I remember when I left, I was approached by Twitter. It's a company that I admired. I'd been a Twitter user for several years before I joined, and I just got to a stage where I was, ready to go. But I was worried because, I felt very safe at Google, and I had two very young children and a wife, and my wife said, I remember we were shopping one Saturday with kids, and if anyone's had the pleasure of shopping on a Saturday with kids, I feel for you. But we were out, and I was walking around thinking about the pros and the cons. And I said to my wife, well, the pros are this, and the cons are that. And she just literally looked at me and said, which one makes you more excited? And I said, Twitter. She said, well, if it doesn't work out, you can get another job. Yeah. And that reminded me it was all right to do that. And by the way, the mindset wasn't brought on by Google. It was my own fault. It stopped being muscle memory. So coming to Twitter, which was, I think for me, the best of both worlds in terms of a big American company where it's innovative, it's growing, it's in terms of new products, it's doing something truly unique with a truly customer service attitude in many ways. So we do try to instill that in the team. Yeah. We look at stuff, whatever we do, and think, how could we have done it better? A chap who was in the team once sent an email to a few of us saying, I just met with such and such, and they said how good we were and blah, 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 blah. And I said, fantastic. If he had said the opposite, would you have sent that email to us? And he went, I don't know, actually. And I said, well, actually, I'm as interested, if not more so, in that.
And so if you were to talk a bit about Twitter and about your, you obviously have said yes to come and talk to us today, which means that you in some way or another, you support the concept around taking your whole self to work. How do you try and make sure that is part of the fabric of being here at Twitter? What do you do to encourage people to bring their whole self to work?
We like our team to be happy, and you can lose sight of that. We've had, when I first started here, there were 20 odd people, and within about a year, one of our very close, very young colleagues died. She contracted cancer, and when she was diagnosed, she died 4 weeks later. She's 29 years old. I mean, that doesn't happen. That is, you can't explain that. And I remember there were, I say not many of us, about 30 or so at that stage, and people had never seen this before. I hadn't really in that way. And you had to look at the team, and I remember myself and my boss at the time were having a 1-to-1, and the person's parents came to drop some stuff off, and we welcomed. They were just so lovely and stoic, and then we just sat down in the 1-to-1 and just cried. But these things bring you together, but you learn as well that actually there's more to life than so being happy, being part of a good team, and the hashtag you might have seen, that you might love where you work, gets bandied around from that came from her final tweet.
Right. Okay.
And it really brought people together. But you learn from, okay, people go through this, but people are resilient. So to your point, what we try to do for separate reasons, but it's really helped us, is when we were hiring at the beginning, when there were 20 of us and we needed to employ another 20 in a month, and then we said, look, we can't just get the same, hire everyone from Google or Microsoft or Facebook or wherever. Let's try to get a diverse mix of people with different, not just diverse, but different experiences as well, different backgrounds. It might take longer, but we think it'll be more well-rounded. And I think that's what's ended up happening.
Right, okay.
So, we hired people from print, whether they were journalists or editors or people in their sales teams. We've hired people from the TV industry, the radio industry. And it's really helped us all learn more, not just about their respective previous experiences, but some of the practices, and just have a more diverse group of people.
Fab. Can I just move away from your teams and bits onto you? Have there been times through your career when you felt absolutely this is your space, 2 feet in the ground, owning that space, with all of you, and other times where that hasn't been quite so much the case? And reflecting on those scenarios, what would you take from those in terms of thinking about workplace cultures that we want to create?
Yeah. I'm incredibly lucky, from having a very lucky childhood, schooling, etc., to in my workplaces that I've been asked to join, and to an extent I've chosen as well. And by and large, I haven't there's one place when I was a temp that I didn't like. I was in credit control and had to phone up old people to make them pay, and it came to the fore that the company was targeting old people because they're likely to sign up, and I just didn't like. So I left. But I was a temp, so I wasn't bound to the place. Everywhere I've worked since in my career has ostensibly their soul, their rationale comes from a very good place. Yeah, I think that first job I was so comfortable, too comfortable, and my learning there was I was there for 6 years, and actually I probably should have left after 4. Right. I'd stopped learning. Yeah. I'd stopped kind of growing as an individual. So when I moved, I thought, right, I'm going to go to another company, and what I'm going to lose is this, the community that I was working in, but also this product knowledge I have of having been somewhere that I was one of the veterans, so to speak, but I knew everything that I needed to know. And that's makes you feel quite powerful. And you talk about imposter syndrome, So I'll go to the next company, I think, right, I'm going to be found out here. And then you just realise, you can do that too. So that really helped. So I think in terms of, there's an element of a company encouraging you to bring your whole self to work, but also you have to be willing to do it yourself, put yourself often outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. So I've been very lucky. I think that certainly Twitter really kind of champion what I can do, and they let me be me, and a good me tends to work well for the team and various other things. And I think that's always been the case. Jack Dorsey came and did a trip in the UK a couple of years ago, and often when the CEO comes, you take them to see clients or whoever, and we did a full briefing. So I thought on the morning I'd take him through the briefing. So I gave him the briefing, and he just looked at it and went, "Look, forget that. How are you? How are you feeling?" And you just feel, wow, And I think that I've got a very good friend who myself and he have had very similar kind of careers in terms of progression and with the same age, etc. And I remember a few years ago when times were tougher at Twitter, his company was having a hard time as well. I remember he was struggling in many ways, and I worked out what the difference was. My boss and bosses were just so supportive, whilst his were not, and made him feel inadequate. So I remember once, I felt like I was doing everything wrong. So I said to my boss, who was hugely, a guy called Bruce Daisley, a guy who's very kind of, and he's done so much for me in my career, but he once said, he could be very kind of direct, firm, tell you what you're doing right, we're doing right. And I said, look, please tell me if I'm doing anything wrong, because I feel like I'm, ruining everything. And he just said, you're doing better than I could. And it just makes you feel so empowered and liberated, having someone that will tell you straight from a position of love and respect when it's going wrong or right. That's where I've been lucky. Having people to just want you to be you.
It's interesting. You just reminded me, the best advice I think I ever got given when I was in my first manager's job was make sure you appoint people who are brainier and better than you, because then your working life will be much better.
That's right.
It's such an interesting thing, because of course most of us as a manager or as a boss think that you've got to be better than other people, which of course
and you feel threatened if people are better than you, and that's absolutely true.
So can I just talk to you a little bit about your personal experience? You often speak about BAME, Black and Minority Ethnic, Inclusivity in Media and Tech conferences and talks, and you also mentor at the Media Trust. Can you tell us a bit about why that's so important to do and why it's so important to you?
Obviously, diversity, inclusion is a huge topic of conversation today, quite rightly. For kind of human reasons, you shouldn't discriminate. But B, for productivity reasons. There are countless articles, pieces of work showing that a diverse workforce is a better workforce, more productive workforce. I'm originally from Iran, but I've lived here all my life. I first lived in London, and then, as I said, my mother, who was the breadwinner in our house, hugely successful, got a job. Her job didn't require her to necessarily to work in London, so we moved to a town called Marlow, which is in Buckinghamshire. And then I'd been in the UK 6 months, albeit in a school in London when I was 4. And my mum and dad went to the local school I was going to and said to the headmaster, we're worried about if his English is good enough. Clearly, we've only been here like 6 months. And the chap said, I'll tell you what, we will monitor this and then let you know. They said, okay. A week later, they called them back and said, you've got Mr. Nasr, you've got nothing to worry about. If anything, his English is better because he's already been doing schooling. And they were relieved, walking out, and he said, look, don't worry. This is the early 80s, by the way. He went, don't worry, we're used to teaching foreign children. We have another foreign child. And my mother said, oh, right, where are they from? And he said, Wales. Right, and he's being deadly serious, right? So that was the UK, the home counties of that era. And, we joke about it now, but I was championed at that school for being different. Genuinely. And then
great experience.
It was a great experience. And then when I went to school, it was more like in secondary schools, North London, where it was so diverse. So I have to say, having gone into the workforce, I've never felt held back because of my background. So I've been very lucky. However, I recognise that a lot of others have not. There's just very few people at the bottom, joining young, which means that, of course, there's going to be even fewer at the top. So a chap I know called Naren Patel, he's a phenomenal chap. was at Prime Site Outdoor. He had been in the industry longer, and he'd noticed this. So he just set up this group called Media for All. We'd meet and we do speed mentoring and various other things, and working with the likes of the Media Trust. Part of it is mentoring, but part of it is trying to just talk about it more to people who are thinking about what to do, and try to create opportunities for them to do it.
Yeah. So if we were to talk about social media just a little bit, seems appropriate given your role.
Sure.
It's easy, isn't it, for people to blame a platform when people are behaving, in particular ways on that platform. And often social media can be demonized for a negative impact on well-being. But if you were just to talk about your sort of pitch around the benefits of social media.
Yeah. Look, and the one thing I want to stress is, obviously we'll talk about the benefits. We don't want to hide from the issues.
Yep.
So we take health on the platform as our number one priority. And we're very proud with how much we've moved it and made it better, but we've got a long way to go.
When you say health is our number one priority, what does that mean?
Well, we want Twitter to be a lovely place for public conversation.
Okay, sure.
That doesn't mean they just go there and everyone's just agreeing with one another. People support different football teams, people have different political views, but we want the debate to be as healthy as possible.
Yeah.
And we've tried to make that with various things. So we have quality filters, we've got various other things, but also on top of that, one of the things we've had in the past is that if you were to notice something on Twitter you didn't like, you could report it, and we would take it down if it's breached our terms, right?
Yeah.
But the onus was on you or others to report it. Now we're trying to put the onus on ourselves to proactively see it using machine learning.
Right.
So a few years ago, 100% of our action was taken based on reports. Now that's around 50%. So that is health for us.
Okay.
So there's product
That's
stuff
helpful,
we can do.
Yeah.
We've tried to simplify our policies, which make it really, really clear on what you can and can't do. We've taken off loads of accounts that we've stopped. For example, around terrorism, I think over 600,000 accounts. But to your point, it's easy just to get stuck and focus on that. What we don't talk about is the positive side, the side where actually people come to get a community of people that could be like-minded. That, for example, interestingly, knowledge sharing.
Yeah.
Someone spoke at an event and they were talking about, Twitter being like an interest network. So shortest distance between you and what interests you most. And they're talking about, say, football or music. And actually a chap in the audience said, "Oh, I'm a professor of autism at the University of Warwick. And there were 41 people who do my job in the world. And we just use Twitter to keep in touch that way." So stuff that's very niche like that, to something like Sarah Millican doing her join-in event at Christmas, where if you're lonely at Christmas, it's a way of just chatting to someone else, to big movements, Me Too, for example, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
So that it has a huge role to play there.
If you were to just think about the positive impact that it can have for people to be able to express themselves and to express themselves well and to feel able to be authentic and true on those platforms, is there anything that we can take from that learning and think about how we apply that into the workplace?
I suppose it has empowered people to use their voice stuff. And I think if you go to work and you feel that you can't speak, that's either down to you or the place you work, right? And if we focus on the place you work, because obviously that might be making it down, make you feel not confident to do it, then you might not be working at the right company for you.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And I know, again, it's a luxurious thing to say because you have to make money and you have to support people, and I get it. But being able to have an opinion and voice it in a civil way and stuff like that is really important. And I think that we actively encourage open feedback and various other things. And it's often stuff you don't necessarily want to hear, but it's really important.
Yeah.
I think one of the key things that's proven about people who struggle with mental health often don't feel they can talk to other people.
Yeah.
And similarly, I'm quite an open person, and that's really helped me. I've been really lucky actually at Twitter. I've worked with someone who is a coach called Louise Shepherd. You know, she said, "Oh, is there an agenda you want to follow?" And I said, "Well, look, my whole life is an agenda. Can we just talk?" And things would come up. And she's phenomenal. And I'm very lucky. Again, that's very luxurious. But most people should have something. It doesn't have to be a coach. It can be a colleague. It can be a friend. It can be, you know, if you surround yourself with people you love and that love you, but in a pure way, not in a way that they're kind of sycophants or anything like that, or something's in it for them, then you're setting yourself up for success, really.
Yeah. Really interesting, because one of the things you talked about and hadn't made the link before was around, we've got to have these discussions in a way that is civil. And one of the things which some people are saying about that principle of my whole self is, what if actually people start behaving badly and then just saying, this is me?
Yeah.
And I guess my response to that is, there will always be boundaries. We may have a flexible dress code, but if you turn up with nothing on, then somebody will say something to you that we want to understand each other's personalities. But you can't just say, sorry, I didn't meet the deadline because I'm one of those people who doesn't meet deadlines. There are
I killed that person, I'm a murderer.
There are those rules around all sorts of things. So if somebody was to question you about, are we in danger of welcoming the wrong things into the workplace by encouraging people's whole selves, how would you respond to that?
I think the whole thing about my whole self is respecting other people's whole selves, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that's the way I would kind of sum it up.
Perfect.
You know, the whole point is, if you think everyone's the same as you, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. So accept there are differences. So to your point, there's boundaries. You know, be your whole self while respecting others. You know, and I think that's important. And I think the happy thing is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. And actually, on that, I was at this. I was at a conference or a course, and there's the chap that they spoke about. There's a guy called Sean Aker, who's an American psychologist, I believe, at Harvard University. And when he was growing up, he applied for Harvard thinking he'd never get in, and he got in, and he was like overjoyed. And when he went there, he thought everyone would be like him. And the first thing he noticed, that there were a lot of people there that from when they were 3 or 4, they were being groomed to go, to somewhere like this. But it was almost tragic that it had no positive impact, or not the positive it could have had. And he got fascinated with this, and he went into the mind, and he said that people think that in order to be happy, you need to be successful. But all the work he's done has shown that it's the other way around. The CEOs that he interviews, he said something like the vast majority, I'm not going to give you a number because I'll get it wrong, but it's the vast, vast, vast majority of CEOs interviewed are hugely positive people.
Yeah.
So they've become CEOs because they're positive. They're not happy because they've become a CEO.
Yeah. I chair a thing called Social CEOs, which is awards for chief execs who are exemplary on social media. One of the things
Strangely, I haven't received anything from that yet.
You're not in the third sector. Twitter doesn't count. It's definitely in the private sector.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And one of the things that the judges are really clear about is that you should only have one account. That part of being yourself as a chief exec and demonstrating authentic leadership is, one account, whether that's Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, etc.
You mean one account on each?
Well, yeah.
One account, right, okay.
One, that you don't have
two
Dara the dad
of
Dave and 2 daughters, and Dara MD of Twitter.
Yeah.
What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think one seems, I don't know whether it's more authentic. I think the authenticity, again, on Twitter is a key thing. Mm-hmm. I think that CEOs that are great on Twitter, yes, they talk about their business, but they might also talk about their passions and talk about other things. If you were to follow me, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you do, but I wouldn't just...
You're going to start after this.
I wouldn't just talk about work. I might talk about something I've seen that I like, something else, or retweet something funny. Again, Twitter's a bit more about look at this rather than look at me. So you kind of share stuff and do various other stuff. So, my recommendation, what I do is to have one and discuss on that one what you want to discuss.
And the really important bit of that is that it's up to all of us to hold our own boundaries. There's nothing mandatory about what we share and what we don't share, whether that's on platforms or at work. It's, ensuring there are not barriers to sharing yourself.
No, obviously on Twitter, we have terms of service. You have to respect and within. And again, I think, you have to it's like what we said. It's about, you bring your whole self whilst respecting other people have whole selves too.
And I'll put in a word for that special award for the third sector chief execs next time.
I'll be starting to write my speech right now.
So just to move us into finishing, one of the things which we know is absolutely vital for people to be able to be successful at work, to live and to be well, is to also look after themselves, to have their form of self-care. How do you, as a MD of a big company, look after yourself, switch off?
It's interesting because I've got a family, and I've got 2 daughters of 12 and 10, and my wife and my dog, Dave. Yeah, he's a great lad. I think that I can talk about him for ages if you want. But when they're young, or very young, it's difficult, because you're busy at work and you're very busy at home. You get a lot of joy, but it's quite difficult to look after yourself. Someone at Google once said it's like you can only see in black and white. You've lost all sense of peripheral or, depth in your vision. It's just monochrome. And I think that as they've gotten older, it's been fascinating to see what I like doing. And oddly, quite sadly, I like Call of Duty. Right. And I love doing stuff with my family. My wife said, we need to have, instead of Christmases and stuff, instead of doing a load of presents, let's do experiences, and it really is cool. Yeah. You get away from your phone. I have to say, one of the things, and this is an odd one, I've had a very unhealthy relationship with exercise throughout my life. I either do all or nothing. And about a year ago, I joined a place near where I live, and I love it because, again, which is really odd, it's not just where you go to work out and do these classes. It's a bit like a community. I go when it suits. I do it. I work hard, then I can work hard. And actually, in many ways, it saved me, in terms of my happiness. Yeah. Last year, my father died. And it wasn't wholly unexpected, but you can't prepare for these things. I know you've talked about bereavement, and it's hard, very hard. But having that has really helped me, because afterwards, A, there's a sense of smug, you've done some work out on you. But B, you just feel mentally much better about yourself, and I think more equipped to cope with stuff. So the way I keep myself kind of sane or happy and stuff is you have to do stuff that makes you happy and surround yourself again by people that you love and that love you. And that can be anywhere. That can be at work, at a football match, a lunch with friends on a weekly basis, monthly basis. It can be anywhere, but just finding those people. Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah.
You've talked about your daughters, and others. If you're to think sort of fast forward a generation, what sort of environment would you hope that they will be living in, operating in order to thrive and to be their selves, whether they're scientists, working in a cafe, working in tech, whatever?
I've got no idea, but what I realised was that, as I told you, I was quite mischievous at school. So it's a nice 360, isn't it, I suppose? That and I was very kind of average, like middle of the road in the school. I could have done better and whatever. But there were some people that were just, you always have people that you'd think are like brain boxes or whatever. And actually, but some of them lacked a lot of social confidence and various other things. And I realised when I had children, I cannot make my children amazing at maths or English or science or whatever. All I want them to be is happy, healthy, and confident. And I can contribute to all those 3 things. And actually what my parents made me feel was just very, very loved. Yeah. That I could achieve what I wanted. Yeah. For example, my mum would say, I'd come home and I'd say, oh, I'm the second shortest in my class. And she'd say, no, you're not. And it was factually correct. Yeah. She couldn't argue with it. But I knew what she was trying to do was she thought I was feeling bad about myself. I wasn't. But, it's that kind of thing. And all I can try to do for my children is I don't want to lie to them about their height. Don't get me wrong. But I want them just to feel really happy about who they are, about who they have that love them and stuff. Healthy, contribute what I can there. So just confident. Because whatever society is like, if you are those 3 things, you're more likely to succeed, in my opinion. Yeah. So that's all I can do, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. I mean, I think, there's some themes, aren't there, that have come all the way through that we have choices, think about surrounding ourselves with people who love and be kind to people around you, and find the things which you enjoy, and hopefully the rest follows. So thank you, Dara.
Thank you.
So that was Dara. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. A great start to the series, and thank you to both Dara and the team at Twitter for inviting us to their amazing offices for this chat. It was great to talk to Dara about his experiences, his understanding around social media, and to think about his hopes for the future in relation to mental health. Do remember to subscribe, rate and review on your chosen podcast apps, and get involved on social media using the hashtag #JACPodcast. Today, the 18th of March, is also My Whole Self Day, so make sure to check out the My Whole Self hashtag on social media and join in the conversation. I hope you're looking forward to the rest of the series, but for now, I'm Simon Blake, and thanks for coping with us.